History remembers Joan of Arc as a warrior saint, a young woman who led France to victories during the Hundred Years' War. But what is often overlooked is another side of her story: the warnings, the prophecies, and the predictions she made. Many of them foreshadowed tragedy, betrayal, and death. And tragically, few listened. This is the story of the woman who predicted disaster, but was ignored until it was too late. Joan was born in 1412, in the small village of Domremy, France. She came from humble beginnings, a peasant family with no power or wealth. By all accounts, she should have lived and died in obscurity. But as a teenager, Joan began to claim she was receiving visions. She said saints and angels spoke to her, commanding her to help France, a nation broken by war with England. Most dismissed her as a foolish girl. What could a teenage peasant possibly do in the affairs of kings and armies? Yet Joan's words carried a weight, not because of who she was, but because of what she predicted. When Joan first appeared before local leaders and church officials, she spoke of France's desperate state. But she did not just talk about the present. She made predictions. One of her earliest prophecies was specific and bold. She claimed that the French army would lift the siege of Orléans, a city under English control, and that Charles, the French Dauphin, would be crowned king in Reims. To most, this was impossible. The English were powerful, the French army demoralized. Orléans seemed doomed, yet Joan insisted with unshakable certainty. Her prediction came true. In 1429, under her guidance, the French won at Orléans. But not all of Joan's prophecies spoke of victory. Some were far darker. At the height of her fame, Joan made a chilling prediction. She told her followers, and even her enemies, that she would be captured before midsummer. She said it openly, without fear. She even warned the French commanders of betrayal and negligence that would lead to disaster. She pleaded with them to act carefully. But the leaders of France, emboldened by recent victories, ignored her. They believed the English were weakening, that the tide had turned for good. Joan's warnings were inconvenient, and so they were brushed aside. Then, just as she predicted, tragedy struck. In May 1430, at the siege of Compiègne, Joan was captured by the Burgundians, allies of the English. Betrayal and miscalculation played their role, exactly as she had foreseen. Her prophecy of capture had come true. But now, her enemies would twist her voice into something darker. Joan's capture marked the beginning of her downfall. She was sold to the English and put on trial for heresy. The trial transcripts, which survive to this day, reveal not just her courage, but her continued predictions. She told her accusers that misfortune would come upon them, that France would ultimately prevail despite her fate, and that they themselves would face God's judgment. She even predicted the manner of her death. She said she would be burned, and that the fire would not silence her cause. Her words were laughed at, dismissed as arrogance or madness. But history would prove her right, once again. On May 30th, 1431, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in Rouen. She was just 19 years old. As the flames rose, many mocked her. The crowd saw her as a heretic, a witch, a dangerous girl who dared to speak of visions and prophecies. But as the smoke cleared, something strange happened. Witnesses reported that her composure, her faith, and her final words shook even her executioners. Some wept. Others whispered that they had just killed a holy woman. And in the years to come, her predictions about France proved true. The English were driven out. Charles remained king. Joan's warnings, ignored in her life, echoed after her death. What makes Joan's story so haunting is not just her death, but the repeated pattern. She spoke, she warned, she predicted. And people refused to listen until it was too late. When she predicted victory, people doubted, until the victory came. When she predicted her capture, people dismissed her, until she was betrayed. When she predicted her death, they laughed, until the flames consumed her. Her story is a tragedy not just of war and betrayal, but of arrogance. Those in power could not bring themselves to listen to a teenage peasant girl, no matter how accurate her visions. And because of that, opportunities were lost, and a young life was destroyed. Centuries later, Joan was declared a saint by the Catholic Church. Today, she is remembered as a national hero of France, a symbol of courage and faith. But there is another way to see her, as a warning about ignoring voices that don't fit the mold. Joan was poor, young, and female. 3 reasons why men in power dismissed her words. And yet, time and again, she was right. The tragedy of Joan of Arc is not just that she was executed, but that she was ignored. Her predictions could have saved her life and perhaps altered the course of the war sooner. But pride stood in the way. Joan of Arc's story is often told as one of divine inspiration, of miraculous victories, of martyrdom. But beneath all of that lies a simpler, more human truth. She was a woman who saw what others could not, who spoke when silence was safer, who warned of tragedy even when no one listened. And perhaps that is why her story endures, because history is filled with voices like hers, ignored, silenced, mocked. But when the tragedy comes, it is those voices we remember. Joan of Arc was not just the Maid of Orleans, not just a saint or a soldier. She was a woman who predicted disaster, who spoke truth to power, and who was ignored until the flames took her. And in the end, history proved her right. Joan of Arc's story reminds us of a truth that echoes across history. Sometimes the voices that warn us, the voices that see what others cannot, are the ones we silence first. If you believe stories like these should never be forgotten, help us keep them alive. Subscribe for more forgotten and untold stories. Like this video if you think Joan's warnings deserve to be heard. And tell us in the comments, do you think history would have been different if people had listened to her? Your support helps bring hidden voices back into the light, where they truly belong.